What's up, guys? Welcome back. I am Dwayne Rothman. I am the Furious Wrestling fan. Wrestlemania season, or what's left of it, is right around the corner. As I record this, it's like a week and a half away from WrestleMania 36. And in light of WrestleMania 36 right on the horizon, I decided to review an old WrestleMania and do that for the classic reviews here on the channel. Now, I decided to review an old WrestleMania that I have not seen completely in length before, and there have been quite a few of them. And for this particular WrestleMania, the only thing that I had ever seen up until this point, at least to my best recollection, is the main event for this show. And I decided to go back an even 30 years and watch and review WrestleMania 6 from Toronto, Canada, in the Sky Dome. And a little side note, it was the first international WrestleMania in history. Now, 67,000 plus fans packed the Sky Dome for WrestleMania 6. And they set an attendance record for the building that night, just as history will repeat itself again for WrestleMania 36, where their attendance will be 0. For WrestleMania 6, however, they had a stacked card. It was a 3.5-hour show, and I am not even going to pretend that I sat and watched this all in one sitting to review this. On the contrary, I did take one small break because at that point I was questioning my decision of why I thought it was a good idea to do this. I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's very difficult for me to watch stuff that's, I guess, this old. Just because of what I grew up with and what I'm used to and what I became a fan of. So going back and watching this is hard to do with trying to be open-minded to what things were compared to what I grew up with or what it is now or whatever. It's, you know, so it can be hard for me at times. WrestleMania 6 takes place in 1990. It is the first WrestleMania of the 90s, and yet it still has a very 80s feel, and I will get to that as we go along. The show opens with Vince McMahon talking about the Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior main event for the show and talking about them as they are just like they are great powers in the universe, you know, with talking about the stars and the galaxy and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of neat little open there. We go right to the commentary team for the evening of Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse the Body Ventura. And talking about, once again, the Hogan Warrior match. That is the ultimate challenge. It is title for title. Never been seen before. It's the first time that 2 titles have been on the line in one match. And where one guy will walk out of the ring as a double champion. First time in history. We go from that to Robert Goulet singing "Oh Canada" in Toronto. Obviously, since they are in Canada, it makes a little more sense. Instead of, traditionally at these early WrestleManias, you'd always get like America the Beautiful or our national anthem. Since they are in Canada, completely makes sense. Although it seems like the crowd wasn't so completely behind this. There was a little bit of mixed reaction. I almost thought I even heard some boos in there at one point. As far as my take on it, I've heard worse singers, but I've also heard better. It was kind of, it was what it was. What I did like about this is we are only 3 minutes and 45 seconds into the show, and we already go to our first match. It didn't take forever. We start getting some action started right away. I love that compared to these, hour and a half, 2 hour long pre-shows that we get nowadays. No, 3 minutes and 45 seconds in, we go to the first match. And the first match is the Birdman, Coco Beware, versus the model, Rick Martel. Now, in this WrestleMania, just like in ones previous to this one, and I don't know how long this was a thing, but they had the little ring go-kart thing, you know, to take the wrestlers back and forth between the backstage and to the ring. This cart, bringing Coco to the ring, was taking days. So I was excited to get to the first match right away, but the entrances took a bit. Because I feel like they could have walked faster than this cart was going. And this was a continuous thing all night long. But, as the referee is checking out Coco Beware as what was, something that was normal back then, where, the referee would check, the wrists, if they have wrist tape on, or would check the boots, check the, the upper tights, that kind of thing, to make sure there was no illegal objects. As the ref is checking Coco, Rick Martel jumps him, establishing the heel and babyface right from the start. So even though I had no idea what was leading to this match, if anything, because it did seem like there were a lot of matches in this show, and I mean a lot of matches throughout this show that had no build-up, had no rhyme or reason for what was happening. It was just WrestleMania. They just stuck a few guys in the ring, and, it's just a match for WrestleMania. So whether this one had some heat to it or not, I don't know. But Rick Martel jumping Coco Beware does establish who is what right at the very beginning. Coco does end up taking control. You have some pretty quick action, but it doesn't last long. Rick Martel cuts him back off. He takes back over. And when Rick Martel takes over, he slows it down. And you get that cocky, arrogant heel that, prancing around, pointing and, throwing his arms up to the crowd and, like he's some kind of big shot and all that kind of stuff. I guess the Boston Crab was Rick Martel's big move, I guess, which... I've said it once at this point, I've said it a million times with what I grew up with, what I'm used to. The Boston Crab is like your big move. Wow. I mean, obviously Jericho would use it later on, but he would at least rename the thing. The Boston Crab just, it just seems like it's really not important, but this was just one of the things of the time. Anyway, Rick Martel goes for the Boston Crab, but Coco is fighting it and fighting it hard. Rick Martel can't get Coco Beware turned over. He's fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And finally, he gets out of it, and Coco Beware fires up. He gets in a couple flying headbutts. The crowd's starting to get back into it. Coco Beware goes for a crossbody. He misses. Rick Martel goes for the Boston Crab one more time. And almost immediately, Coco Beware submits. The model, Rick Martel, wins the opening match of WrestleMania 6. And because it was just a Boston Crab, it seemed very odd to me for this to be the finish. But again, trying to keep an open mind, this was the way things were done back then. Even the smallest minute things meant more back then compared to now. So, okay, that's fine. A submission victory. I feel like it was a strong opening match to the show. It wasn't slow. It wasn't boring. It was two guys that had some athleticism, that was, doing some things, really kind of got the crowd into it right at the beginning. And after seeing this match, I had high hopes, or at least as high hopes as I could, I guess, possibly have for WrestleMania 6 after seeing this opening contest. So, we go from that, we go backstage to Mean Gene. He interviews the Colossal Connection, which is Andre the Giant and Haku with manager Bobby the Brain. Apparently, they are the tag team champions. Mean Gene messes up the name Colossal Connection. He says something else. I caught it. I didn't know exactly what it was he said, but he flubbed the name up there a bit. I caught it. So did Heenan. Bobby Heenan calls him out for it. Regardless, Bobby the Brain Heenan is talking about their opponents, which is Demolition. Action Smash. He tries to turn it over to Andre and Haku, who try to say something, but with Andre's thick accent and with Haku and them trying to talk at the same time, I didn't understand what it was that they said, so if it was supposed to mean anything, I really don't know, didn't catch it. We go right from that, which was a promo, because at least Bobby Heenan, carried most of the thing. We then go to Demolition, who responds with a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming and a lot of typical, what I feel is 80s style promo work. Just your typical yelling about what they're going to do to their opponents, and it's very almost cliche, I feel, at this point. But, that was that. And then we finally go to the ring, and it is for the World Tag Team Championship, the Colossal Connection defending against Demolition. The champions get absolutely no entrance. None. They're just already in the ring by the time Demolition is done talking. Part of that, I feel, is because of possibly Andre's health, and I will touch back on that here in just a few minutes. But Demolition, they come out, they're getting a big cheer from the crowd. They're taking off all of their spikes, all of their, ring entrance attire, and they get jumped by Colossal Connection. So that's how we start this match off. But Demolition, they regain control fairly quickly. There's quick tags in and out between Axe and Smash. We get this long backslide attempt from, I'm believing it was Smash on Haku. They stood there in the middle of the ring for what seemed like ages. Both of them trying to get this backslide pin in, and they stood there back and forth. And it was going okay for a minute, and then when we got to this spot, everything really slowed down to a screeching and grinding halt, and I got bored to death, I think, from about this point on. After this, Andre tries to get into the ring and break up a pin attempt, but he's moving so slowly, and he looks even bigger than what he did, like, say, at WrestleMania 3. And he was already in pretty bad shape at WrestleMania 3. Now we're talking 3 years later, and he's just not moving very well at all. And so he gets back to the outside. Axe, he eventually gets back into the ring, but he's getting double teamed, sort of. Haku and Andre are doing some of the classic heel stuff, trying to, taunt the other member of the opposing team into the ring so that the referee's distracted. They start double teaming the other guy. They're cutting the ring off. So some classic tag team wrestling stuff here, even though Andre seems pretty limited on what it is that he can do. Let's see here. Smash, he finally and eventually gets tagged back in as a hot tag, and he starts taking out Haku. Andre gets in. He tries to help Haku. Haku ends up kicking Andre. Andre falls and stumbles back, gets tied up into the ropes, therefore kind of rendering him useless at that point. Demolition, they do the, I'm not sure if they ever called it anything in particular. They didn't say anything about it on the commentary, but you get a tag team, like, backbreaker, mid-rope elbow drop tag team maneuver by Demolition. And the pin, and Demolition wins. And Demolition are the new tag team champions. Andre the Giant was never the legal man in this match at all. Wasn't in the ring as the legal man, didn't do hardly anything, just stood out on the outside of the ring. Again, I'm guessing because it's because of his health. And I feel like the little bit that he did get involved, with trying to break up a pin maneuver or just get in the ring just to, basically cause his team to lose with the miscue. I feel like Andre was used the best that he could be used given the circumstances and the situation. So I really can't, I guess, fault any of this match on Andre at all. And essentially Haku was trying to basically pull this match on his own for his team. So it wasn't a very strong match at all, but there were circumstances here that, I could kind of look past. But at the end, really, it kind of broke down, and, you know, the tag rules weren't really enforced as much towards the end, therefore Demolition picks up the victory. It was a slow start. It did get a little better, like I was saying, but, you know, after the match, Bobby Heenan, he's scalding Andre, he's pointing him in the chest, and he eventually slaps Andre, which Andre the Giant then retaliates. He's like throwing Heenan around a little bit, punching him. Haku tries to, you know, stop it. He gets beat up for his trouble. Andre gets in the little cart, and he gets cheered as a babyface as he leaves the arena. So, again, I've pretty much already said what I feel I need to say about this match. It was what it was. It could have been much worse, but I think it was as good as it could have been, given the situation and the circumstances that they were in. It was all right, but essentially, Demolition leave as the new tag team champions. We go backstage. Mean Gene interviewing Earthquake with Jimmy Hart. Again, in the typical promo of, you know, this era, Earthquake just does a lot of yelling, and he's yelling about Hercules. And then we go to the next match. And the next match being Hercules versus Earthquake. And Earthquake apparently is undefeated at this stage in his career. So we get in the ring. Earthquake tries to jump Hercules, but Hercules is too smart. You see, he's a little too quick. He gets out of the way. But Earthquake does end up, I think he was just like shoving Hercules into the ropes or something. And Earthquake starts jumping up and down. And Hercules is acting like he can't like get his footing, right? Like this Earthquake is just rumbling the ring so much that he's losing his balance, yet the referee's standing there looking at him like you're a dumbass. It was so out of place. And it was just so silly and stupid. And if the referee played along too, I mean, maybe, I guess, you know, I could have just went, that's kind of silly. But when the referee was standing there just fine and Hercules acts like he can't stand up, that was just dumb. So he just kind of looked like a fool. Anyway, we get a test of strength. You know, and at this point, this is where that 80s feel I was talking about kind of comes in. You got two big guys doing very slow, simple stuff, and it's snail slow, and it's very boring. And, you know, Hercules tries the shoulder tackles or clotheslines, and Earthquake won't go down. Eventually, Earthquake does get the advantage, and he basically sits on Hercules, and he gets the win. Earthquake wins. And then after that, there was the aftershock of the Earthquake, where Earthquake sits on Hercules again. I was kind of falling asleep at this point. This was very boring. This was very typical of the time. And it just, I kind of hated every last bit of this. So that was what it was. And we're just going to move on from there. From there, we go to the backstage where some woman, I don't know who it is, probably some celebrity of the time. I don't know if it was Rona or exactly who the hell this was. But she was interviewing Miss Elizabeth, who apparently had been gone for a while. And she was wanting to know where she's been. And I guess she's just been backstage, I guess hanging out or doing something. I don't really know. That didn't really last very long, because we go right from there to Sean Mooney, who is interviewing Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And Sean Mooney, I meant to mention this earlier and I forgot to write it down, so I forgot, but I believe Sean Mooney was the one kind of interviewing Demolition earlier in the show, and it was interesting to see a young Sean Mooney compared to what he looks like nowadays, who obviously Sean Mooney is in the NWA these days. Well, at least he's supposed to be, you know, nothing's really running or operating right now, but that's where he was as an NWA. But here he is interviewing Brutus the Barber Beefcake. We get a typical promo again, and we move on. Next match is Brutus the Barber Beefcake against Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect is accompanied to the ring by the Genius, a.k.a. Leapin' Lanny Poffo. Perfect. Mr. Perfect tries to jump Brutus the Beefcake. Brutus the Barber Beefcake, excuse me. It doesn't work. Brutus Beefcake, he ends up getting the advantage, and we get some more classic 80s style stuff, and I'm talking about like the atomic drop that somehow sends Mr. Perfect over the top rope to the floor. You know, and the selling by Mr. Perfect is just great. You know, and most of the time, I see Mr. Perfect, especially in like these, early 90s to even mid 90s type, matches. Mr. Perfect's sells are fantastic. This is no exception. The Genius ends up distracting Brutus Beefcake. Mr. Perfect grabs this scroll, which looks like some kind of clipboard kind of deal, where he clocks Brutus Beefcake in the face with that. And, you would think that would be the victory right there. But it's not. But things slow way down at this point. We get some taunting by Mr. Perfect. Mr. Perfect, he's got control. The Genius is still trying to help him out a little bit. He's trying to hold the hat on his head. He's got a goofy, almost like buzz cut on the top half of his head. And I'm not talking like a mohawk or a mullet type cut. I'm talking like a bowl like cut, and then like long in the back, because apparently Brutus Beefcake had gotten to him before this. So he's trying to hide this goofy looking haircut. Essentially, though, we go right to the end of the match, because there wasn't a whole lot to speak of in this one. It didn't last very long. But Brutus the Barber Beefcake, he picks the legs, he drops Perfect down, he slingshots him. Mr. Perfect gets, since he is getting the slingshot, he hits his head on the top of the ring post. And we see this nowadays time and time again. But Mr. Perfect lands back in the ring, Brutus Beefcake covers and gets the win. And again, being that the time, the times that they were in at the time, and little things meant so much, this spot has been done to death. But back then, they played it off as Mr. Perfect got knocked the hell out because he hit his head on the top of the ring post, and Brutus Beefcake won because of it. Again, because of how much it's been overdone. It was odd to see a match end in this fashion, but that's what we get, essentially. Which was kind of fine. I was getting a little bored with this match. There wasn't not a whole lot to speak of. So, if they would have went too much further, anyway, either way, as Perfect basically escapes, Brutus Beefcake gets his hands back on the Genius, and he continues to trim some more of the Genius's hair before we basically end this match and this segment. And so, again, it kind of was what it was. The best point of it, the selling by Mr. Perfect. But other than that, not a whole lot to speak of. At this point, we go to a package, which is, if I remember correctly, the first package of the night, which tells me this match actually had a little bit of story going into it and a reason why they were fighting. But a package on Roddy Piper against Bad News Brown. We go backstage where Mean Gene is interviewing the Hot Rod, and I completely forgot about this. I've never seen the match, but I do remember seeing clips or at least pictures of this before. And this is the WrestleMania where Roddy Piper decided to paint half of his body black for some reason. I don't really know why that was a thing. And I'm pretty certain that he wouldn't be able to get away with that kind of thing nowadays. But this was still pretty early 1990, and they were in Toronto, and I guess it was fine then. So he's sporting the half painted, half unpainted. I mean, of course, it was a good promo by Roddy Piper, talking about Bad News Brown. Any time that Roddy Piper gets on a mic, he was gold. This was no exception. But we go to the match right after this. Of course, it's Roddy Piper against Bad News Brown. The half paint, half not paint, I guess, was playing some mind games with Bad News Brown. And this match, I guess if you want to call it a match, broke down pretty quick. And what I mean by that is this wasn't no match at all. This was just a street fight. This was just a brawl. I mean, all you got was punches, some headbutts. I mean, that's really all you got. These guys were just kind of scrapping. There really wasn't a whole lot to it. And, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what else I really expected, but this is what I got. So, at some point, Roddy Piper reaches in his tights and he pulls out one glove. And he puts one glove on. I don't know if that was supposed to be like a taunt to Bad News Brown, because Bad News Brown was only wearing one glove too for some reason. I know that's been a thing for several guys throughout the years, and I guess, I don't know, Roddy Piper decided he wanted to fit in with that gang, I guess. I don't know. But either way, They start brawling some more. They wind up to the outside. They're outside the ring. Bad News tries to punch Roddy Piper next to the post. He punches the post. It basically, what happens is as they're fighting, they both get counted out. So we get a double count out for this match. So, I mean, they kept fighting for a little while up and down the aisleway, but I mean, this is the first match that you give me where you give me some kind of video package that sort of explains what's going on between these two guys. It has a little heat, has a little bit of a backstory to it, and it ends in a double count out? Like, what? And again, it wasn't even a match to begin with. You finally get some story, but it's not a match. It's just a brawl. They brawl for a couple minutes, and then you double count out, move on to the next thing. It just was so... by the end of that, it felt like a complete and total waste of time. And to be quite honest, I could have completely gone without watching this. At all. To me, it served no purpose whatsoever. And so... That was Bad News Brown and Roddy Piper, I guess. Yeah. We go from there to a backstage segment where somebody named Steve Allen is playing the piano in the shower. What? He's okay, but he's joined in the showers with the Bolsheviks, I think is how that was pronounced. And they were trying to get Steve Allen to play the Soviet national anthem. And he wouldn't do it. And he never did it. And they just moved on to the next thing. So to me, that whole segment also was completely pointless. And I think the only reason that was done was to get Steve fucking whoever the hell, Steve Allen, a little bit of spotlight in the show. Apparently, like probably again some other musician or celebrity or whoever the hell, just to get him a moment in the show, I guess. So we go to the next match, and it is the Bolsheviks, which is Nikolai Volkov, which that's a, pretty well-known name, but he is joined by Boris Zukov. I think I pronounced that right. I've never heard of Boris Zukov before. No idea who that was. Apparently, upon doing just a smidge research, because I was kind of wondering, this guy was James Harrell, is his actual name, and like he was in the World Wrestling Federation for only like a year, and like he didn't really do anything else. So like I think this is probably like the biggest thing in his career that he ever did was be a part of WrestleMania 6, because it seemed like he had no other career to speak of. But he's joined together with Nikolai Volkov, and they're the Bolsheviks. It's Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov, but they're the Bolsheviks. Yeah, okay, so they're wrestling the Hart Foundation, obviously Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim the Anvil. Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov, they tried to start singing the Soviet national anthem, but the Harts, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, they jumped them. And we get a heart attack, and the Hart Foundation wins. I mean, it really was that quick, that fast, that simple, that there was no match. They jumped the Bulls, they dropped the Bulls and got the heart attack, and it was over, and they left, and they moved on to the next thing. So, as far as I'm concerned, with the exception of the fact that they had mentioned it in the Demolition and Colossal Connection match, where the Hart Foundation apparently had challenged the winners of that match to a tag team title match, is the only reason that I can assume that this match, I guess it was a match, even took place in the first place. Maybe to make it look like the Hart Foundation had a claim to being the number one contenders, looking that strong. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of, because it's the only thing that makes any damn sense. Other than that, another segment that had no reason to be on this show. So now we're talking basically, well, it was 2 matches in a row and 3 or 4 segments that were absolutely pointless to this whole show. And at this point, I'm about pulling my hair out. I'm hoping, at this point, that anything would happen, and I could try to get back involved into this show. And so we go to the next match, which is the Barbarian versus Tito Santana. And we get a quick interview from Tito. It was a decent promo, I guess would say pretty much a typical promo from Tito. It wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. This match starts off, and they go back and forth for a few moments. Tito starts picking up the action a little bit, running the ropes, doing some things. Barbarian gets in control. He slows it right back down. There's a lot of punches between, both of these guys. There wasn't a whole lot of, an occasional body slam here and there. You get a running forearm from Tito, which I believe is like one of his big deals. But Bobby Heenan, who was there with the Barbarian, puts the leg of the Barbarian up on the rope, so therefore, rope break, and Tito basically kind of gets screwed out of the pinfall there. Barbarian ends up regaining the control. A big top rope clothesline from the Barbarian, and the Barbarian wins. It was a bit on the boring side, but yet it wasn't one of the worst things I'd ever seen. I felt like it was a pretty standard match. Let me just say that. I don't know really what else to say about it. It didn't go too long, which was kind of nice. It was, there was a little bit of quickness because of Tito. The big Barbarian slowed it back down, and, so you had a little bit of action. It didn't go too long. It was pretty standard, and they kind of got it done and over with, and, it was what it was. And, to be honest, compared to the last couple matches, it wasn't really all that bad. And I think, personal opinion here, is it stood out as being better than it probably was, just because the last couple things that I had seen were garbage, essentially. So, but again, Barbarian wins, and we move on. We go backstage with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and Sapphire. They have a little promo, and we see a video package between Dusty Rhodes and the Macho King Randy Savage, and how sensational Queen Sherry's been getting involved, and Sapphire's been getting involved, and that brings us to the next match, which I didn't look up to verify if this is an actual thing, but as they put it over on commentary, history being made with this match, as it is the first mixed tag team match in WWF/E history. The Macho King Randy Savage and Sensational Queen Sherri versus the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire. Again, it seems like for some reason, and especially with Macho King Randy Savage, and this may have been done on purpose just to drag it out just because he's the Macho King. But that cart that I was talking about earlier, how it took forever, it took twice as forever for Macho King's entrance. Well, they finally, though, get down to the ring. And Dusty Rhodes, he gets in the ring. Him and Sapphire get in the ring. Dusty grabs the mic, and he tells Savage that he's got the crown jewel. He's got that thing that the Macho King and Sherri don't have. And that crown jewel is Miss Elizabeth, who then rides the cart down to the ring and is in the corner of Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire for this match. One thing that I didn't really care for, and I think it was, okay, it was one of them things that, again, given the time thing, the era that they were in, I guess it was a little more acceptable. Wouldn't be, I don't think, as acceptable today, given, the kind of anti-bullying type stuff that the WWE is into and all that. But Jessie the Body is shaming Sapphire and her body and the way she looks pretty hard throughout this entire match, and it was essentially Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire, they're in the ring, and they're kind of they're making Sensational Sherri and Macho King Randy Savage look like fools in this match. Savage and Sherri are bumping all over the ring for Dusty and for Sapphire. Savage and Sherri, they're running into each other. They're tripping over each other. They're looking like bumbling idiots. Obviously, Sapphire is no wrestler. She's like dancing and like just, using her hips to like bump into Sherri, who's then taking bumps. It's so ridiculous. Savage finally at one point does take control, and we actually start getting a little bit of wrestling. All this silliness aside, we get a little bit of wrestling between Savage and Dusty Rhodes. Savage dropping those big axe handles onto Dusty from the top rope. Macho King brings the scepter, into the ring and into the match. He uses that to hit Dusty in the back of the head with that coming off the top rope. And here's where it starts to go a little off the rails for me. I mean, again, it wasn't on the rails to start with. They got it on the rails, and it kind of went back off the rails again at this point because at one point, Savage, he like body slams Dusty or something, right? And Sherri tags in, and again, under mixed tag team rules, the guys face the guys, the ladies face the ladies. That's just how it's supposed to be done. If one tags in the other, then the opposing members have to switch. That's just how the rule is supposed to go. But Sherri is tagged in, and she does a splash off it was either the top or middle rope, onto Dusty and goes for the pin. And the referee starts to count. So I'm scratching my head at this point because I'm confused. I didn't think that this pinfall would be legal. If Sensational Sherri gets tagged in, then technically Sapphire should be getting tagged in and now is the legal competitor. So I don't know how this was making any sense at this point as far as the rules were concerned. Elizabeth on the outside of the ring, she starts getting involved a little bit. She's jaw-jacking with Sherri, who then sticks her head out between the ropes. Elizabeth shoves Sherri backwards, and she trips over Sapphire. Sapphire rolls up Sensational Sherri, and Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire win the match. There was a lot of silliness to this match. It was, knowing that Sapphire was not a wrestler, was not a competitor, I didn't expect a whole lot of complete seriousness out of this match. I did expect more Savage and Dusty Rhodes wrestling each other to carry this match, but it was kind of 50-50. because the little wrestling we did get, it was Savage and Dusty, yet the rest of the match was silliness and gaga and, just, Savage and Sherry just flopping around all over the place, and it was just really kind of, I don't know. I didn't really care for the match. It was okay, but it didn't really do it for me. They could have left the exact same thing still intact, but just gave me a little bit more wrestling between Dusty and Randy Savage, and I probably wouldn't have hated it so much. I don't really hate it, but I really wouldn't have minded it as much. But this is what we got, and Sapphire is credited with a pinfall victory at WrestleMania. At this point, we waste a lot of time. And what I'm talking about is, I don't know what the holdup was or why they felt they needed to waste so much time. But oh, buddy, did we waste some time here. So Gene Okerlund is in the backstage, and he's interviewing Bobby the Brain Heenan, and he's going nuts about Andre. They do that for a minute or two. We then go to Roma or however the hell, and she's standing there with Jesse Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon, and she's talking that she's got or seen or is in possession of some kind of video footage of Jesse Ventura. And it's funny because Monsoon goes, well, what, are we talking like X-rated type stuff here? So I got a little chuckle out of that. But they then go to Sean Mooney, who's interviewing Savage and Sensational Sherry. So the whole thing with Rona, in this film of Ventura, which is never mentioned again, by the way. That, again, wasting time and pointless. But again, Sean Mooney interviewing Savage and Sherry, getting their thoughts on their match. They're going ballistic. Sensational Sherry's running around, like, kind of in the background, flinging her hair all over the place, and just screaming almost uncontrollably. It's kind of annoying to a certain degree. And then we go to a Demolition interview talking about how, they're the tag team champions now, and they said it was going to happen. And again, nothing, no real reason of why they were saying this. We've seen the match. Then we go to a Hulk Hogan interview where he's talking about the Ultimate Warrior, in their upcoming match. You get the typical Hulk Hogan shtick with the biggest arms in the world, and brother, and, warrior brother, and, the Hulkamaniacs, and more brothers, and, moving on. Then an Ultimate Warrior promo where, he starts ranting and raving in typical Warrior fashion. I didn't understand half of what it is that he said. The only part that I found slightly amusing is whoever was supposed to be conducting the interview, Ultimate Warrior basically shoves him out of the locker room and basically told him, you don't deserve to breathe the same air as Hogan and me. I did get a chuckle out of that. So finally, after all of that meaningless, okay, the Warrior promo, the Hogan promo, maybe, but these other, 4 things, completely unnecessary, just a complete waste of time, and oh, buddy, was I waiting for anything, and I mean anything, to happen by this point of the show. So finally, we go to our next match, after I think I started to age quite a bit at that point. It is the Orient Express, the team of Sato and Tanaka, and they are with the manager, Mr. Fuji, and they are going up against Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, also known as the Rockers. I don't know if this was their first WrestleMania match or not. I don't think it was. As a matter of fact, I think they were at least the previous WrestleMania or 2 before this, the Rockers were, but the Rockers against the Orient Express. Tanaka and Sato, if I've seen them before, I don't know where from. And I didn't really do any information checkup on these guys. But the match starts off with Tanaka and Marty Jannetty starting the match. Things break down real quick, and I watching this match, I start to get this idea that this is where a lot of stuff that you see nowadays and for the past many years started with stuff like this that the Rockers were doing, just jumping in the ring, doing tag team moves, and the referee not really holding them accountable to the count and stuff. You know, the double teams I get, but, you know, it's like time didn't matter to them. And so it was interesting to see that kind of stuff this far back. The Rockers, again, with some tandem offense, double team maneuvers and stuff, they basically clear the ring. But right after this, Marty Jannetty starts getting double teamed. Mr. Fuji ends up getting involved. And finally, Jannetty's able to make a tag to Shawn Michaels, but he's caught off rather quickly. And, you know, some more back and forth. Nothing really to speak of here. But in pretty quick fashion, Shawn Michaels tags back in Marty Jannetty. Jannetty's got a hot tag. He's clearing out Sato. He's clearing out Tanaka. He's just clearing the ring everywhere. He makes his way to the outside of the ring, and he had the cane that Mr. Fuji carries around with him, and he was actually going after Mr. Fuji. And it was either Sato or Tanaka, I don't remember, but he spins Jannetty around, throws salt in his eyes. Marty Jannetty can't see. He stumbles over the railing. He's like laying in the front row. And next thing you know, the bell's ringing, and the Orient Express wins by countout. And let me tell you, that was a pretty lame finish, in my opinion, to what was... It was an alright match. You know, really. There was some action. There was some actual tag team, you know, stuff going on as far as the ring psychology was concerned. Obviously, at that time, Marty Jannetty could still work a pretty high caliber. I always know Shawn Michaels could. Sato and Tanaka looked like they were, you know, doing pretty well for themselves. The match itself actually wasn't bad. It's just this ending sucked. This ending ruined it. I could have seen the salt to the eyes and, you know, a dirty pin or something for the Orient Express to actually gain the victory. But this to me was just weak. This was just a weak finish. And I don't know, maybe it's one of those things that I've talked about so many times doing these kind of reviews and stuff, that maybe this is just one of those things that just hasn't aged well for me personally, because I hate seeing countouts. I hate seeing disqualifications, especially at an event like WrestleMania. It just seems so out of place. And again, I'm going to say it again. It seems weak. Like they have no other way to get through to the ending of a match than to do something like this. It just, I don't know. I hated it. I hated every last bit of it. At this point, to be honest, I had to take a break. The ending of that match, you know, plus all the interviews and crap beforehand, and the silliness of the Macho King Sherry Dusty Rose Sapphire match, and, you know, the Hart Foundation, you know, there was so much crap for so long that I had to take a break. And, you know, kind of, I was really tired of this show by this point, honestly. When I finally came back to it, they go backstage, and somebody, I don't even know who it was, they're interviewing Rhythm and Blues, which is the Honky Tonk Man, and Greg the Hammer Valentine. And what in the hell happened to Greg the Hammer Valentine? It looks like he's got some kind of like real long black wig on. He's got, you know, a goofy like leather jacket. He's trying to strum a guitar like Honky Tonk Man. It just, I never remember that stage of Greg the Hammer Valentine's career, but it looked so silly and hokey. Honky Tonk Man could pull it off. That was his thing. That was his shtick. But for Greg Valentine, we get to go to our next match, and it is Dino Bravo with Jimmy Hart and Earthquake versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And I was laughing at this pretty quickly because, again, they're in Toronto, Canada, right? Hacksaw Jim Duggan, he comes out doing his entire Jim Duggan shtick. Got the American flag, he's, you know, the thumb in the air, the fucking, you know, 2x4, the whole 9 yards. he gets up to the ring, he's standing on the ropes, and he's trying to chant and get the crowd to join him in this chant of chanting USA, and the crowd is practically dead silent. I mean, Duggan, bro, it seems so silly to me, and it's just so out of place. You're in Canada trying to get them to chant USA while you're in the ring facing a Canadian. Why would they chant for you? Why would they chant USA for you? Even though you're supposed to be the babyface, I guess, in this scenario, the crowd really just could have gave a shit. And it was so out of place that it just made me laugh. I felt that was pretty stupid. Again, I know it was his gimmick and it's his thing and everything, but it made no sense in that environment whatsoever. This match, again, very basic. A lot of punches, a lot of clotheslines, some atomic drops. So again, it's just another typical match of the times. And I'm sorry that I don't really have too much enthusiasm at this point, but it seemed like there are so many of these matches that had the same similar feel to them that I'm bored. I'm bored out of my mind at this point, okay? Because it seems like I've already seen this match 3 times, okay? So, and again, this one didn't last long either, really, when it comes right down to it, because after some of these, basic run-of-the-mill cookie-cutter things, Jimmy Hart grabs a 2x4, he throws it into Dino Bravo, but Duggan, he grabs it instead and hits Dino Bravo right in the back as the referee's distracted by Earthquake and gets the win. Hacksaw Jim Duggan wins with the assist by the 2x4, inadvertently thrown in by Jimmy Hart, but obviously it wasn't intended for him. But afterwards, they get the jump on Jim Duggan. Earthquake squashes Jim Duggan with that Earthquake sit on the chest splash thing 3 different times, and that was basically the extent of that. It was, I needed a wake up after that. I mean, I had turned it off for a couple hours and came back to this, and oh man, I really could have cared less about the rest of this show at this point, to be honest with you. That was so lame and so boring that it was really hard for me to care about the rest of this show. We move on from there. We get another package, which I think is only, out of all of this, I think only like the 3rd video package for one of these matches at WrestleMania throughout the entire night. Okay, which tells me that a lot of these matches either had no build-up and were absolutely pointless, or they had build-up and the build-up didn't matter in the first damn place. But this one had a little bit of build-up, had a little bit of backstory, as Jake the Snake Roberts and Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. So we get a little video package there and we go to the match. Ted DiBiase, he goes to the ring. He's accompanied to the ring by Virgil. And we get a promo from Jake the Snake Roberts in the backstage area. It's another decent promo by Jake the Snake Roberts. He always had a way of delivering his promos in a certain way, a very low tone of voice, so you pay attention, very well spoken, promos. So another good one by Jake there. The story here is that basically the winner of this match gets the $1 Million Championship belt. And I guess Ted DiBiase's been using it to wave his money, essentially, in everybody's face. Jake Roberts basically stole it, I guess, at one point. And so even though this belt, this championship, was never basically sanctioned, I guess, by the World Wrestling Federation, this belt was, I guess, kind of on the line here, in a sense. The match starts off, and Jake goes for the DDT very early. And he goes for it over and over again, like it's the only thing that he knows how to do, almost. Once we do start getting into the match a little bit, though, we actually get a little bit of ground wrestling by Jake Roberts. You know, he's got Ted DiBiase kind of pinned on the ground, grounded like hammerlock kind of thing, really working on the arm. They make their way back to their feet, and Jake Roberts goes for really strong knee lift, but he as he lifts his knee up, he flies into the corner, almost to the top rope, and just flies through the air for some reason. I don't know if it was the whole thing of he goes to lift the leg up and then DiBiase maybe kicks the other leg, which sends Roberts flying into the corner. That's all I can assume because I couldn't see exactly what happened. I think there was a camera out of place or something, and you didn't see exactly what happened, and you just see Roberts running to the other side of the ring and then flying into the turnbuckles for no reason, which that was kind of weird. The fans, at some point, I noticed, I don't know if it was, they tried to play it off on commentary, the fans were just so into this match. I see it a different way. The fans, I feel, were so bored watching this match, they started doing the wave around the whole arena multiple times. And then it wasn't just the ones on the floor, it was the ones in the different layers of stands. So they had 2 or 3 different waves going on. It was completely ridiculous. At this point, even the commentary team, they weren't even talking about the match. They were talking about the waves in the fans. It's just, so to be honest, I started watching the fans at this point. I really wasn't even watching the match anymore because it seemed like the fans were more entertaining. Essentially, let's see here. The Ted DiBiase gets the $1 Million Dream at one point. It looks like it about knocks Jake Roberts out. They're laying on the mat, but instead of getting the count or something, Jake gets his foot on the ropes. He's got to break the hold. So he goes for a pinfall. Again, Jake Roberts, foot on the rope, breaks up the pin count. Virgil eventually just pulls Jake Roberts out of the ring. The Snake retaliates by slamming Virgil on the floor. Ted DiBiase goes after him, gets the $1 Million Dream on the outside, and they, I guess, push each other into the ring post, I guess. And so Jake Roberts, he's laying on the outside of the ring, but Virgil grabs DiBiase and picks him up and throws him back in the ring, and we get a count out. Again, another count out. So I guess Ted DiBiase wins the $1 Million Championship. So again, the match wasn't really all that, and obviously the fans were more entertaining throughout this entire match, and then another count out victory for again another match that had some backstory. So now that's 2 off the top of my head without actually, going back through all of my notes of 2 matches that had some kind of backstory going into WrestleMania 6 that ended on count-out victories. So as far as I'm concerned, really didn't solve anything. So it just, I'm losing my mind by this point watching the show. After the match, Jake Roberts finally does get the DDT on Ted DiBiase, but who cares now, right? I guess, Ted DiBiase, even though he won the match, technically, Jake Roberts still stands tall, I guess. I don't know. I really don't. I just, guys, I was slowly losing my mind and my patience to try to continue this show. We go backstage again to Sean Mooney, who is with Akeem, also known as the One Man Gang. He's there with his manager Slick, who Slick tries to deliver a promo and is annoying as hell. Every single word that came out of his mouth, he did it in the most annoying way possible. And if that was by design, bravo. And if it wasn't, don't ever do it again. We go to Mean Gene, who's with the Big Boss Man. And prior to this, Big Boss Man and Akeem were tag team partners. They were the Twin Towers, but apparently no more. The story that I got out of this, just with these promos, is that Ted DiBiase tried to basically buy the Big Boss Man and basically buy the Twin Towers, I guess. Boss Man wouldn't have it, would not accept the money, and so therefore now I guess Akeem and Slick are mad with Big Boss Man. So that's what I get out of this. So obviously that's your next match as well. Akeem, the African Dream, versus the Big Boss Man. So Twin Tower former tag team partners colliding here. But before the match can even begin, Ted DiBiase comes back around and he gets some shots in on the Boss Man, attacks him on the outside. Big Boss Man, he finally gets in the ring. Akeem starts bringing the punishment early, but his offense doesn't last very long. Boss Man just gets the advantage. You get this big like sidewalk slam thing, and Boss Man wins. Just like that. It was short, sweet, to the point. It didn't last very long. And to be quite honest, the couple things, this was another one of those matches where it was just two big guys, right? And already I'm already dreading this, but they did very minimal things. They did just the bare minimum, but the minimum that they did very well, and it looked good. So they got done what they needed to get done. They ended the match and they got the hell out. It was fine by me. I had no problem with this whatsoever, and I guess if you needed to have this match on WrestleMania, then they did it, I guess, the best way it should have been done, and they got through it. Big Boss Man beats Akeem, and that's that. Our next segment, we get Rhythm and Blues coming down, and they're being driven to the ring in a pink Cadillac. And it's kind of funny because you can see Diamond Dallas Page, a younger Diamond Dallas Page, driving the pink Cadillac to the ring, which was interesting. They get in the ring, and here we got Honky Tonk Man and Greg the Hammer Valentine, and they're going to sing, apparently. What the fuck? I'm going to tell you something. They get in the ring, they start singing this goofy-ass song, and I'm telling you, I hated every second of this. This was atrocious. Their singing sucked. The song sucked. Greg Valentine in this terrible getup, he looks completely ridiculous. You know, Honky Tonk Man can't sing worth a damn. They got two ladies out there with her, I guess, is supposed to be, you know, backup singers or something. They're terrible. This whole thing sucked. And it's not like it was one of these things where it got interrupted like right away and you didn't have to suffer through it. No. You had to suffer through the entire damn song. And when they get done, they sit there and go, well, would you guys like to hear it again? I mean, if the hell no, I don't want to fucking hear it again. Yeah, it sucked. It sucked the first time, and I highly doubt it's going to get any better the second time. Luckily, the Bushwhackers are there, and the Bushwhackers crash the party. They don't get their hands on Valentine and Honky Tonk Man or nothing. They basically just run out the ring. But the Bushwhackers, they just grab the guitars, smash the guitars, they do Bushwhacker things, and that was the end of that segment. This entire segment, again, this would have been fine if they would have went out there maybe sang one line of this song, and the Bushwhackers came in and broke the whole thing up. I could have been a lot more tolerant of that whole thing if that's how it went down, but no, you had to listen to this whole stupid ass song, and I hated this whole damn thing, and I'm glad that was finally over, and I was hoping that at this point, I'm hoping, and I'm almost praying at this point, that we're getting to the main event, okay? So after all that, I'm hoping that we're finally getting to the main event. And nope, we still got another match. You know, the time is winding down. Again, this was a 3.5 hour show, okay? And it's starting to wind down, and I'm hoping the main event is, like, next. And it's not. So the next match, Ravishing Rick Rude versus Superfly Jimmy Snuka. Jimmy Snuka, he gets in the ring. He's got his back to Ravishing Rick. He's like adjusting his knee pads or something. So Rick Rude, again, being the heel, jumps Jimmy Snuka. There was a lot of people jumping people in this show. Jimmy Snuka just gains control after that, basically right away. He's throwing Rick Rude around a bit before it starts to go back and forth a little bit. You get a couple slams, you get a couple headbutts and stuff from Jimmy Snuka, but essentially, I felt like they didn't even build up to a finish. It just finally, like, Rude just grabs Snuka, turns him around, gives him the Rude Awakening neckbreaker, and gets the win. Rick Rude wins. And at this point, I have seen so much stuff that I'm just either shaking my head or I was bored with that. This is another one of those things that wasn't absolutely terrible. The finish to me didn't make as much sense as I feel it should. But again, short, sweet, basically to the point. They got it done and over with, and I really couldn't have been happier, you know. So Rick Rude beats Jimmy Snuka, and that's that. So finally, at this point, we get to the main event, the Ultimate Challenge, the Intercontinental Champion Ultimate Warrior versus the World Champion Hulk Hogan. The first time that it was champion for champion, title for title, happening here at WrestleMania 6. And again, this, to my recollection, and still, even after seeing this entire show, is the only match that I had seen from this event. So it's the only one that I know of. But it had been quite a while since I had seen it. So I didn't mind watching it again, especially since I had seen it before. I believe I remembered the match, or at least most of it. And it's not really that bad, and I'll touch on that in a minute. I actually was looking forward to watching this compared to everything else that I had seen. So Warrior and Hogan, they get in the ring. There's the big stare down. You know, they're both showing their strength. One guy, you know, they go to lock up. One guy shoves the other. They lock up again, and the other guy shoves the other guy. You know, they're both showing their strength at this point. There's not really nobody's really getting the upper hand. You get a test of strength. And, you know, Ultimate Warrior's winning that. Hogan powers back, and then Hogan starts winning that. Warrior builds himself back up, you know, starts getting back into the match. They do that goofy crisscrossing thing where one guy is running one way across the ring and the other guy is running the other way, and they did this at least twice. I don't understand that. I'll never understand that. It looks so fucking stupid to me. But they did do that a couple times. But then we get some body slams back and forth. And finally, Ultimate Warrior ends up getting the upper hand. And he sends Hogan over the top rope. And Hulk Hogan, I guess by the way he landed, he had damaged the left knee. Pretty bad, I guess. At this point, they're really buying time. You know, Hogan, he's selling the knee. He can't put any weight on it. Things slowed back down quite a bit at this point. But even once he gets back in the ring, Hogan ends up regaining control at this point. And he gains control for a while here at this point. He's really, you know, putting the hurting on Ultimate Warrior. And it was a little interesting to me because Hogan, not only does he have control, and yes, he's bringing the punches and stuff, but there's a backbreaker in there. He's got some clotheslines. He brings in the rear chin lock. You know, he's really wearing the Ultimate Warrior down. And then you get a back suplex from Hogan. Hulk Hogan showing that he actually has a little bit of an arsenal in this match. Ultimate Warrior powers out and fights out of a rear chin lock. And there's a double clothesline and a double countout starts. We get up to about a 7. And Warrior and Hogan, they start stirring. They start getting back to their feet. Warrior brings in some of those classic Warrior clotheslines. You get a suplex from the Ultimate Warrior, and we slow it back down again with a big bear hug from the Ultimate Warrior. This lasts a while. And normally I hate this kind of thing, but in this kind of match between these two guys, I understood it. And I'll touch a little bit more on that once I get to the end. So, after this bear hug, the referee ends up getting hit. And the referee goes down. Ultimate Warrior goes for one of his diving tackles. He misses, and Hogan rolls him over for the pin, but there's no referee. In the midst of that, Ultimate Warrior ends up gaining the advantage again. Big back suplex. He goes for the cover. Once again, still no referee. The crowd is way into this at this point. And I tell you what, it is a fairly entertaining match. Ultimate Warrior goes for the big body press, the big gorilla press. Gets Hogan up, drops him, goes for the splash, goes for the cover. Hogan kicks out. He's up on his knees. He starts hulking up. He gets the punches, the big boot, goes for the leg drop, but he misses. Warrior pops back up, the big splash, 1, 2, 3, and the Ultimate Warrior wins and is the Intercontinental and World's Champion. I'll say this, and what I meant by what I had said a few minutes ago, I'd have to say this is probably one of the best matches for both of these guys. Both guys seemed like over the years had a very limited arsenal. And the few things that they did, they obviously did well. They're big stars because of it. But being that both of these guys had such a limited arsenal, it seemed like this match was not going to go well. But the way that it was done and the certain parts where they stalled the match, let it drag on a little bit, the knee injury thing, the bear hug thing, slowing it down when they needed to, and using their limited arsenal to fill in some of the gaps and things. It was very well put together. I felt like in this particular match, both guys used their strengths very well, and they both hid their weaknesses very well. So it was a very good match. And I would never think I'd say that about a Hulk Hogan match because they're all the same. But somehow, some way, they were able to incorporate both of their gimmicks, both of their things that they do that made them who they were, and were able to incorporate into this match to where it made sense, to where it was entertaining, and it was just an overall good match. So, other than that, there really isn't a whole lot to say. After the match is over, Hulk goes out to the outside and he presents the world title belt to Ultimate Warrior. He rides off in the cart while the Ultimate Warrior celebrates, and we fade to black, and that is WrestleMania 6. It's, I tell you, for the first WrestleMania of 1990, that 80s wrestling feel bled all over this. They hadn't shed that 80s wrestling feel yet at this point by a long shot. And with matches like the Rockers match and like the Hart Foundation's match, you can tell that there was a change coming on the horizon. It is very, very far into the horizon, mind you. It's still another good, my opinion, 4, maybe even 5 years down the road. Mid-90s when it finally starts to shift and change. But you see little hints of that out of certain people in certain matches in this show. But it's very few times and for a very short amount of time. Other than that, to be honest with you, most of this show, with the exception of the opener and, the main event, I think, personally, which, again, is strange for me to say, because it's Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, two of the, most one-dimensional guys in the history of wrestling. They had the best match on the show, and if you've never seen that match, I urge that you do so. I thoroughly enjoy that one. But other than that, to be honest, there's not really a whole lot else to speak of for WrestleMania 6. I was hoping to watching this and being that it is a 90s WrestleMania and not an 80s WrestleMania, I was really hoping to enjoy this just a smidge more than I have some of the other ones in the past that I've watched. No such luck, I'm afraid. I honestly could go without ever watching WrestleMania 6 ever again. I probably will watch the main event another time or two, probably. But other than that, that's this WrestleMania. I feel is just it's just another WrestleMania. It's just there, and is not one of the ones that is really remembered for a whole lot. There wasn't really a whole lot that stands out that really kind of stands the test of time as far as I'm concerned. So, unfortunately, that was it. That was WrestleMania 6, and this has been my classic pay-per-view review on WrestleMania 6. So, I hope you enjoyed the review, and stick around, guys. Pay attention to the channel, because in just a week and a half or so, WrestleMania 36 will take place, and it's gonna be history making for good, bad, or indifferent. It's gonna be history making, being that this supposed pandemic we're in the middle of, and everything that's transpiring. With the fact that they're going to have no fans. It's going to be at the Performance Center. It's going to take place over the course of 2 different days, Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be interesting, and we'll just see how good it may or may not be. I feel like WrestleMania 35 was pretty decent last year. So, not only did they have a tough bar to try to get to with WrestleMania 36, but even more so now, the fact that they have all these challenges. So, stay tuned, and in the coming weeks, we will have the 2-day review of WrestleMania 36. So, with that being said, this has been WrestleMania 6 review. You've been listening to The Furious Wrestling Fan. You've been listening to myself, Dwayne Rothman. And until next time, we will talk to you later, guys.